What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. And after a slight absence from the world of MMA predictions, after being knocked down a little by a couple of bad rounds of predicting fights, the fight gloves are back on. Got my confidence back, and I'm ready to rock UFC 146. As you'll know, I haven't done fight predictions for the last couple of UFC cards, but I have still made picks for those UFC cards, as well as the Strikeforce card that just recently went by. I went 3-1 predicting the main card of Strikeforce 40. The only one I got wrong was going with my heart and picking Josh Barnett to beat Daniel Cormier. But the other three of those fights I got right, and on the Korean Zombie Dustin Poirier card, I went 8-4, I believe, in my picks. So I've got my confidence back, and I'm ready to take on the UFC 146 card with the heavyweights. We're going to start on the undercard, starting with a featherweight fight between Mike Brown and Daniel Pineda. Mike Brown, 25-8 on his pro career. He's 1-3 in the UFC. His single UFC win has come against Nam Phan. He is a former featherweight champ in the WEC, and of note, on his career, has 2 wins against Uriah Faber. Taking on Daniel Pineda. Daniel Pineda is 17-7 on his pro career, undefeated 2-0 in the UFC. All 17 of his wins have been finishes. He has 6 knockouts and 11 submissions. And he is a former lightweight champion of Legacy Fighting Championships. As far as how I figure this fight is going to go, Mike Brown, I haven't been overly impressed with his UFC career thus far. As I said, 3 losses. Hasn't found his groove in the UFC yet. I don't see that changing against Daniel Pineda. I'm going to take Pineda by unanimous decision to hand Mike Brown his 4th UFC loss and probably cost him his UFC career this time around anyway. Moving up to the light heavyweights, we have Kyle Kingsbury taking on Glover Teixeira. Kingsbury, 11-3-1 on his pro career, 4-2 in the UFC. Currently, just had a 4-fight win streak snapped in his last fight, and he trains out of AKA. Taking on Glover Teixeira, who is an absolute beast. Teixeira, 17-2, making his UFC debut, currently riding a 15-fight win streak. 11 of his 17 pro wins have come by way of knockout, 15 of 17 finishes overall, which means he has 4 submissions, and trains out of Chuck Liddell's camp, the Pit. You know what? I gotta go Glover Teixeira. 15-fight win streak. I can't deny that. So I gotta go. Even though he's making his UFC debut against a guy with a good amount of UFC experience, gotta take Glover Teixeira. I'm gonna take him by either knockout or technical knockout in the 3rd round. Lightweight battle between Jacob Volkman and Paul Sass, and this is actually one of the harder ones for me to predict because I really like both guys. Volkman, 14-2 on his pro career, 5-2 in the UFC, currently riding a 5-fight decision win streak. Is very solid grappler. He is unbeaten at this weight class in his last 5 fights since he moved down. Volkman is a very good fighter, and he's a guy that I would say is in line for a big step up in competition. Taking on Paul Sass, an undefeated 12-0 on his MMA career, 2-0 in the UFC. Both of his wins come by way of submission in the UFC. 11 out of 12 submission wins on his pro career. And in Jacob Volkman, Paul Sass is getting that significant step up in competition that I say Volkman is currently in line for. But Volkman is a big step up for Paul Sass. Originally, I had Paul Sass winning this fight by way of third-round submission. Then I had Volkman winning by way of third-round knockout or TKO. Right now, I sit on Jacob Volkman winning a very hotly contested unanimous decision victory over Paul Sass. That is my prediction. Moving to the welterweights, we have Dan Hardy taking on Duane Ludwig. Dan Hardy, 23-10-1 on his pro career, 4-4 in the UFC, currently riding a 4-fight losing streak, but even though, yes, even though it is a 4-fight losing streak, you look at the guys he's lost to. He lost his title fight to GSP, lost to Carlos Condit, lost to Anthony Rumble Johnson, and then lost to Chris Lytle. So, I mean, he's not losing to nobodies, he's losing to high-level competition. But, you know, he is on a 4-fight losing streak. Could very well cost him his UFC career. If he loses this fight, he really needs to win. I know one of the Fertittas went on record saying, no, I'm not firing Dan Hardy because he's a warrior and he goes out there and fights, but ultimately it is a business. If he's on a 5-fight losing streak, chances are they're probably going to let him go. Duane Ludwig, 21-12 on his pro career. 4-3 in the UFC. He has a 43-8, I think, professional kickboxing record. 16 of his 21 pro wins in MMA have come by way of the finish. So he only has 5 decision wins on his career. But 11 of his 12 losses have also come by way of finish. As far as who I think is going to win the fight, you know, I love picking the guys that I know if they lose the fight, they're probably going to be out. I got to go with my heart, and I got to say Dan Hardy. So I'm going to go Dan Hardy in this fight. I'll give it to him by TKO in the second round. Moving up to the middleweights, we have Jason Mayhem Miller taking on CB Dollaway. Mayhem, 23-8-1 on his pro career, 0-2 in his 2 stints so far in the UFC. He had a loss to George St. Pierre in 2005, and then, of course, lost the fight to Michael Bisping in 2011. On his career, he has had win streaks of 5, 5, and 4. So there's 14 of his pro MMA wins have come by way of those, have come by way of those long streaks. Mayhem is a really good fighter. He's an underrated fighter. Really did not get the chance to show that in his re-debut against Michael Bisping. That was one of the most roundly disappointing fights I think that I've seen in the last couple of years. CB Dollaway, 11-4 on his pro career. He's 5-4 in the UFC. Currently on a 2-fight losing streak after a 3-fight winning streak. So he was on a 3-fight streak, but now he's dropped back-to-back fights. 8 of his 11 pro wins have been finishes. It really hurts me to not pick Mayhem in this fight. I really want Mayhem to win. He's one of my favorite fighters. I love Mayhem. But just based on what I saw in the Bisping fight, he's got to win a fight to earn my trust back. We'll put it that way. I'm going to pick CB Dollaway in this fight. Although, to be perfectly honest, I haven't been overly impressed with CB Dollaway in any of his fights either. I am going to give it to Dollaway, and I'm going to give it to him by way of unanimous judges' decision. Lightweights, Edson Barboza taking on Jamie Varner. Barboza, an undefeated 10-0 in his pro career, including 4 wins in the UFC. 7 of his 10 pro wins have come by way of knockout. He is a 25-3 pro kickboxer with 22 knockouts. So he is a very accomplished kickboxer and is the former Ring of Combat lightweight champion. Taking on Jamie Varner. Jamie Varner, 19-6, 1-2 on his pro career. He is 1-1 in the UFC. He is the former lightweight champ in the WEC. 17 of his 19 wins have been finishes. He's got 6 knockouts and 11 submissions. And all 3 of his or sorry, no, he's got 6 losses. Half of his pro losses have come by way of submission. I'm going to take Edson Barboza in this fight. I know Varner's got the experience edge on him in terms of bulk number of fights. Barboza's got more fights in the UFC. He's never been defeated. I really like what I've seen out of Edson Barboza, so I'm going to give him the edge over Varner. As I said, unanimous judge's decision. We'll allow the person with the motorcycle and the small hidden penis to go by before we continue. Featherweight fight, Diego Brandao taking on Darren Elkins. Diego Brandao, 14-7 on his pro career, has won his only UFC fight. That was against Dennis Bermudez, which he won by way of submission. 12 of his 14 pro wins have come by finish. He's got 8 knockouts versus 4 submissions. All 4 of his professional losses have, or sorry, 4 of his 7. Geez, I gotta write my stuff down better. 4 of his 7 pro losses have come by way of knockout. Darren Elkins, 13-2 on his pro career. He's 3-1 in the UFC. Has got 2 straight decision victories, although 9 of his 13 career wins have come by way of a finish, 4 knockouts and 5 submissions. And in both of his career losses, he has been finished. This one I'm actually going with the underdog. I'm going to take Diego Brandao in this fight. Elkins has a lot of good UFC experience. 3 of his 4 UFC fights he's won. I really like what I saw out of Diego Brandao in his UFC debut. 14-7 is not an overly impressive record, but at the same time, I like what I've seen from him, even though he has now a little bit of a tendency to get knocked out. I don't think Darren Elkins will knock Brandao out. I think Brandao will get to him before Elkins does. I'm going to give it to Brandao by way of knockout or technical knockout in the 3rd round. That's it for the preliminary card. We're going to move on to the main card now. Heavyweight fight between Stefan Struve and LeVar Johnson. Somebody's car alarm's going off. I apologize. Stefan Struve, I've said before on previous videos, I believe Struve is the future of the heavyweight division in the UFC. He's 23-5 in his pro career, 7-3 in the UFC. Currently on a 2-fight win streak. He beat Pat Barry as well as Dave Herman. 15 of his 23 pro wins have come by way of submission. 4 of his 5 losses have come by way of knockout, including 3 in the UFC. Taking on LeVar Johnson, 17-5 on his pro career. He's 2-0 in the UFC. Both of his UFC wins have come by way of TKO versus Joey Beltran and Pat Barry, so they have a common opponent there. 15 of his 17 pro wins have come by way of knockout, but he's got 4 of his 5 career losses have come by way of submission. So if this fight hits the ground, LeVar Johnson is in trouble, and I expect this fight is going to hit the ground. I'm going to give it to Stefan Struve. I think Struve's going to go out there, try to put this thing on the ground right away, and finish it as quick as he can, and I think he's going to. I'm giving it to him by way of submission in the very first round. Another heavyweight fight. Of course, all the fights on the main card are being fought at the heavyweight weight class of 265. We have Stipe Miocic taking on Shane Del Rosario. Stipe Miocic, undefeated, 8-0, including 2 wins in the UFC. 6 of his 8 pro wins have come by way of knockout. However, he is an NCAA Div 1 wrestling champ from 2008. He is also a former Golden Gloves champion. Taking on Shane Del Rosario. Del Rosario also undefeated, 11-0, making his UFC debut. He has finished all 11 of his wins, 8 by way of knockout, 3 by submission, and he is an 8-1 pro kickboxer, all 8 of his wins coming by way of knockout. Stipe Miocic and Shane Del Rosario, I think, has the ability for fireworks. Neither one of these guys has ever been finished in MMA competition. this is going to be fireworks. This has the opportunity. This has the potential to be fight of the night. I'm gonna give it to Stipe Miocic. I think when you take fights like this with two guys with heavy and explosive hands, I think you almost always have to give the edge to whoever's got the better wrestling pedigree. I believe Stipe Miocic has the better wrestling pedigree, ergo, I'm going to give Stipe Miocic the fight by a unanimous decision. This has the potential to be fight of the night, also has a bit of potential to be a bore if Miocic just sort of takes him down and John Fitches him, but it's got potential at least. Next fight, we have Roy Nelson taking on Dave Herman. Roy Nelson 16-7 on his pro career, just 3-3 in the UFC. He's lost three of four to top competition. That's three of his last four fights. Has losses against top competition. You had a loss against the current heavyweight champ Junior Dos Santos. You had a loss against the #1 contender Frank Mir, and a loss against Fabricio Verdum. And all of those losses have come by decision. So he hasn't been finished in those fights. And all three of his UFC wins have come by way of knockout. Dave Herman, 21-3 on his pro career. Herman is 1-1 in the UFC. 15 of his 21 pro wins have come by way of knockout, and he's finished all but one of his wins. And in his last fight, he actually had a 3-fight win streak snapped. That was at the hands of Stefan Struve, I believe. I kind of went back and forth on this one too, because I have such a soft spot for Roy Nelson, which I know a lot of fight fans do. My head is telling me Dave Herman, and that's who I'm going to have to go with. I've really been impressed by Dan Herman, or Dave, my goodness, messing up everybody's names. Dave Herman, I've been really impressed by Dave Herman, and I think he's got the edge going into this fight with Nelson. I'm going to give it to him by way of unanimous judges' decision. Up to the co-main event, we have Cain Velasquez taking on Antonio Bigfoot Silva. Cain Velasquez 9-1 on his pro career, 7-1 in the UFC. Lost the heavyweight title to Junior Dos Santos in his last fight. 8 of his 9 pro wins have come by way of knockout. He is a 2-time NCAA Division I All-American wrestler. Taking on Antonio Bigfoot Silva, 16-3 on his pro career, making his UFC debut. In his last fight, he lost in the semifinals of the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix to eventual champion Daniel Cormier. 11 of his 16 pro wins have come by way of knockout, and 14 of 16 have been finishes. I'm a big fan of Antonio Silva, but in making my prediction for this fight, I had to think, do I think Cain Velasquez is a flash in the pan? And my answer to that question is no. I think Cain Velasquez is legit. He just ran into Junior Dos Santos, and Dos Santos was the better man. So I can't not pick Cain Velasquez in this fight, because if I did, that's 2 straight losses, and I think Cain's too good of a fighter to take 2 straight losses. Bigfoot Silva, I can see 2 straight losses coming out of Bigfoot Silva. So I'm going to have to give this one to Cain Velasquez. I'm going to give it to him by way of knockout or TKO in the second round. That moves us to our main event for the 265-pound heavyweight championship. We have Junior Cigano Dos Santos taking on Frank Mir. Dos Santos, of course, defending the UFC Heavyweight Championship. Junior Dos Santos, 14-1 on his professional career, including a perfect 8-0 in the UFC. He won the title from Cain Velasquez in his last fight. 10 of his 14 pro wins have come by way of knockout, and he trains with Team Nogueira. Frank Mir, 17-5 in his pro career, including 14-5 in the UFC, so all but 3 of his pro fights have come in the UFC. Currently on a 3-fight win streak. He is the former interim as well as undisputed UFC heavyweight champion. 9 of his 17 pro wins have come by way of tap out. Excuse me. I'm not OCD about much, but strands coming off the fight gloves, that's one of them. So yeah, Frank Mir, very good ground game, of course, showing better stand-up, very crisp boxing. Dos Santos is just a machine, man. I gotta give it to Junior Dos Santos. I'm gonna give it to him by TKO in the 4th round. I think this fight is gonna go deep, and I think Dos Santos is going to be put in deep water in this fight, and I think it's going to say a lot about Dos Santos, how he reacts to that. I think he's going to react well. I think he's going to take out Frank Mir in the 4th round by way of knockout or technical knockout. Those are my fight predictions for UFC 146. I'm going to go over them for you one more time. On the undercard, I have Daniel Pineda beating Mike Brown by way of unanimous decision. I have Glover Teixeira beating Kyle Kingsbury by way of 3rd round TKO. I have Jacob Volkman defeating Paul Sass by way of unanimous judges' decision. I have Dan Hardy defeating Dwayne Ludwig by way of 2nd round knockout or technical knockout. I have CB Dollaway defeating Jason Miller by way of unanimous judges' decision. I have Edson Barboza defeating Jamie Varner by way of unanimous judges' decision. I have Diego Brandao defeating Darren Elkins by 3rd round TKO. Moving to the main card, all heavyweights once again. I have Stefan Struve submitting LeVar Johnson in the 1st round. I have Stipe Miocic defeating Shane Del Rosario by way of unanimous judges' decision. I have Dave Herman defeating Roy Nelson by way of unanimous judges' decision. I have Cain Velasquez defeating Bigfoot Silva by way of 2nd round knockout or TKO. And in the main event for the heavyweight championship, I have Junior Dos Santos retaining the heavyweight championship versus Frank Mir by way of 4th round knockout or TKO. As always, want to hear your predictions below in the comments section under the video. Like the video, subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Twitter, all that good stuff. Keep me going, keep me motivated. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and I can't wait for the fights, and hopefully gonna get my predictions on my videos back on track. Enjoy the fights.